time to introduce him to you if you have not yet met him. Mohammed, thanks for joining us, and congratulations on some great work, including schooling the multi-millionaire Piers Morgan on the multi-billionaire Rupert Murdoch's television show. Tell us, first of all, what that was like.
Well, thank you for that. And I wanted to actually congratulate you as well for your indefatigability, the word that you use all the time, and your resilience, in fact, your patience and your courage on this issue, on the Palestine issue. I think that the community has noted, that you have been a close ally on these matters, and we really respect your work on the Palestine issue. I think that your work in the last 20 years is probably, in the United Kingdom context, the most notable work, and your resilience and strength against some of the far-right elements of our society has also been noteworthy. So I wanted to put that to you.
Thank you.
Second thing, in terms of Piers,
thank you.
Yeah, in terms of Piers, I would categorize him as a person who is who has heavy hands but a glass jaw, in the sense that if you really push him, if you ask him questions, if you in a corner, he will find it difficult to answer the questions that he likes to ask everybody else. And the reason for that is simply because he doesn't actually have. He's not morally consistent. He's only strategically consistent. You mentioned yourself his kind of connections with Rupert Murdoch and all these kinds of organizations that he's worked with. It has been said that the reason why he's acting in this way, and he can't bring himself to condemn the killing of civilians in Gaza, one of the most populated areas in the world with civilians, is because he knows that will get under the skin of his masters, which shows lack of backbone. It shows lack of integrity, that he's not integrous, he's not morally principled in that manner, and in fact, it shows that he doesn't have a moral compass, and that anyone could maybe give him money to say whatever they want him to say.
I'm afraid that's true. But you put him behind the 8 ball, as Americans who play that vulgar game of pool will recognize. You snookered him, as we would say, in the United Kingdom. When you turned the question round, you asked him, will you condemn the Israeli Defense Force killing of thousands of Palestinian children? And he couldn't even answer that.
Exactly. No, I mean, he hasn't even answered that, even after that interview. And the reason why it's very clear for anyone to know and see is because of his ideological and or financial commitments. I mean, if we're being honest about the situation, right? I mean, if we say that killing a child, I mean, this is a very simple argument. I mean, we can make it. Killing a child, whether Palestinian or Jewish, Arab or Jewish, or black or white, whatever it may be, is a bad thing, okay? So killing one black child, killing one white child is equally bad. Killing one Palestinian child, killing one Jewish child is equally bad. Then it would make sense, then, using that kind of logic, that the more children that you kill, the worse it is. And so the IDF has been killing more children. Therefore, they're worse than anyone else in this conflict. Whether one wants to invoke Hamas or Hezbollah or any other entity, Islamic Jihad. If we're talking about the killing of civilian deaths, there's no doubt that there's been more. You've mentioned it before I came on. Civilian deaths that have been killed from the Palestinian side, and historically, from the disengagement in 2006 of Palestine, the so-called disengagement, because in fact they've still maintained effective military control in international law terms. Oh. In 2006, all these operations that they've conducted, from cast-led, protective edge, and every 3 to 4 years, what they call mowing the lawn or killing the people or subduing the populations there. If we're just counting bodies, effectively, if we're just counting bodies, there's no way anyone can make an argument if you believe that the human life of a child who is a Jew and the human life of a child who's an Arab is equal. That baby is equal to that baby. This race is equal to this race. There's no way anyone can make an argument that, in fact, that any other party other than the IDF is most criminal here.
Now, when I started in this cause, in 1975 precisely, you could have fitted all of the people who were ready to say they were with the PLO into this room that I'm sitting in, which is not very large, and room for an elephant at the back of it, at the worst of times. Now, Hyde Park could not contain all of the British people who want to take to the streets and demonstrate their support for Palestine. And if you add those they left at home who can't or won't go on demonstrations and so on, now we are millions and millions in the United Kingdom. And we are now producing, as if from nowhere, people of the eloquence of you and the courage of you. And there are many of you now. I'm seeing them, not least on Piers Morgan. I mean, low key. I mean, he's United Nations class. He's world class. And, you know, when I first knew him, he was a rapper. Now he's a political statesman. In other words, what I'm saying is we're growing in quantity, but we're also growing in quality. And new leaders, new speakers like you are coming forward. You've expressed similar thoughts I saw today and made the point that it is causing some consternation amongst the establishment, that people they bring on, maybe thinking they'll be a punch bag, turn out to be brilliantly eloquent and informed. This is new, isn't it?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you for all the compliments. I really do appreciate them. The new guard cannot have done what they're doing unless the old guard, which is people like yourself, in fact, done what they done. And it's no doubt in my mind. I remember being a child in secondary school or a teenager, and seeing your coverage and your responses, for example, to the 2006 war in Lebanon, and the way there was a particular reporter that you really put on the back foot, doing exactly the same things and techniques that I've employed. So once again, I thank you for the compliments, but I have to put to you as well that you've laid the foundations actually for this, which shows you the importance of intergenerational work. In terms of the PLO, I think it's good that you mentioned them, because the PLO really represent an organization that have tried with the peace talks and that have tried going through, the Oslo Accords and these kind of things. And lo and behold, what we're finding is that the Palestinian issue, even though there have been non-violent attempts to try and resolve the situation, have not found resolutions. I mean, we talk about the Oslo Accords, but people don't realize, because now Hamas, for example, is being used as a scapegoat, that there are, for example, the West Bank is bereft of Hamas. There is no Hamas in the West Bank. They have no effect there at all. And yet, and we have the Palestinian Authority there, which the PLO was part of and then became the PA. Still, you have 44 children being killed in this year alone, according to UN reports, children before the conflict emerged. And so what we're seeing is Palestinian life is being cheapened by people in this country. It's being seen as lesser than. And in fact, I think this is what we're facing. We're facing, actually, you talked about race. Before you came on, there was a segment talking about your own anti-racial politics. I have to put to you that I think that if you believe in an apartheid system, which many people are saying we support Israel and these kind of things, I don't know to what extent they support Israel, because if they support Israel unequivocally and comprehensively and in everything that they do, then they should also they would be complicit in supporting Israel in their racism as well. I mean, it's an apartheid system, not just according to Human Rights Watch and B'Tselem and Amnesty International and even bodies of the UN. But if you look at the law, because in 1973 there was the UN had an apartheid convention. And of the things, conditions, there was 8 conditions that were laid down. One of the conditions that were laid down for something to be called apartheid is that it would have to have laws that discriminate on the basis of race. If one just takes one example, which is the right of return law, the Aliyah, it effectively says you have the right to return if you're a Jew, okay? And if you convert, by the way, to Christianity or to Islam, that right of return is actually is relinquished or is rescinded or whatever it may be. And so you lose the right to return if you convert. This is just this example alone, which no one can deny because it's entrenched within the statute books of Israeli law. This example alone, it shows you clearly that Israel is an apartheid state, just in the same way as South Africa was. In fact, there's a very good book that was written on this topic about the secret allegiance between South Africa and Israel. The point being here is that you have people like Piers Morgan who claim to be anti-racist. You have people across the political spectrum who claim to be racist, but then they talk about supporting Israel unequivocally. And I don't see how that actually works. How does it work when you've got communities of people, Palestinian people, who are being imprisoned in the West Bank without any? You got 1,000 children in prisons in the West Bank. I mean, you have children being killed, as we've mentioned. We have Gaza, we have the blockade going on, and there's a reason why Gaza and the West Bank are not part of an Israeli state. Not that we're proposing a one-state solution, but that this should be put on the table that if Gaza with a 2.2 million population and the West Bank with a 3.2 million population of Arabs were consumed into an Israeli state, you'd have a majority of Arabs actually in Israel. And if you have a Knesset which has a PR system with proportional representation, then they couldn't do this. So in order to try and subjugate the Palestinians, they can't have them as part of the state. They can't have a two-state solution. So they effectively have to have them between two situations. Situation A is they can't be part of the state, and situation B is they can't have their own statehood. So here, this is, if not apartheid, even worse than actually apartheid, because I don't think South Africa had this state of affairs where 10,000 people were killed in 22 days in this way. And so people that are on this side of history, that they're talking about supporting Israel's right to defend itself, and that's all they're talking about, and they won't even bring themselves like Piers to condemn Israel. I have to ask the question, I mean, how could it be conceivable? How is it intelligible? How is it conceivable? How is it conceptually possible to support unequivocally a state like Israel and not to be racist? Because to be an apartheid supporter, is it not a prerequisite to be a racist? That you believe it's legitimate to discriminate on the basis of race? And I think this should be the new narrative. The new narrative should be if one has unequivocal support, and that is a big conditional, because not many people have unconditional support, but if people have unconditional support to the state of Israel, they should be questioned about whether or not they actually are racist people.
Well, the leader of the Labour Party, the leader of Her Majesty's opposition, used exactly your word, unequivocal. My support for Israel is unequivocal. And that same person, Sir Keir Starmer, said that Israel had the right to cut off water, electricity, and food from the occupied territories. And he is a king's counsel. You couldn't get a more senior lawyer than him. Now, unless he's masquerading as a lawyer, he obviously knew that Israel did not have the right to do this. That to do this would be unequivocally illegal. But he still supported them. And he's the leader of the Labour Party.
I have seen him come out and try and retract some of those statements or try and clarify them. But you're right. In the first instance, it was quite clear what he said on LBC radio. And this is a scandal, if anything could be said about it at all. It's a scandalous state of affairs for someone like Keir Starmer, who's, by the way, I mean, in terms of the Muslim population, cancelled iftar events that he had in Ramadan. He has shown the cold shoulder to the Muslim community, complete disrespect. I can't see how anyone from the Muslim community after this would vote for him or vote for his party. He's really alienated the Muslim community. And with this, his support, as you mentioned, using the term unequivocal, then I would question him on this very matter. I'd say, look, there's laws that are entrenched. We're not even talking about issues that can be disputed. Like, for example, the El Hilal Mustashfa, the hospital in Gaza, where they said that was misfiring of this or that, which is a ridiculous proposition anyway. But these things, there's a level of, let's say, insignificant doubt that one can employ. But when we talk about laws which are entrenched and one can refer to them, they're digitized and they're online, like the right of return, the absentee property laws, which allow a disproportionate ability for example, Israeli Jewish people in West Bank and other places to effectively seize property that would otherwise be for Arab people. There's settlements and these kind of things which have been consistently said to be against international law. And then after that, the killing of civilians and the war crimes that have been committed, which go against Geneva 4, which go against all kinds of principles in international law. If people can't speak up about these kind of things, we must question their integrity. We must question whether or not they're racist. Because all I say is, I want to know how it's possible if apartheid is defined as discrimination, or at least a prerequisite of it is discrimination based on race. How could it be possible for a people to support a state which is effectively an apartheid state without having as a prerequisite of that a legitimization of racial politics or racism in politics or racism in law? So they should be questioned, and I think this is a way in which we will separate the men from the boys directly. I mean, how do you support these apartheid laws, or do you condemn them? And that's another question we can ask them. Do you support the right of return, which is only for Jewish? Do you support the laws on, for example, property, which are discriminatory to Arabs? Do you support the settlements? Do you support the war crimes? Because once again, all these things show that the international establishment is moving towards racism, effectively, which is cheapening the lives of the Palestinian people comparative to Jewish people. And this is, I think, it's actually scandalous.
Mohammed Hijab, you've been marvellous. I knew you would be. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows.